I'm a local news reporter in a decent-sized Midwestern city. You'd probably know the name. And as a result, each day is always some improbable adventure. It's what drives me, the desire to find something new and unique and really drill down deep. Uncovering Watergate-style scandals or exposing some societal ill, or capturing the birth of a social movement, are the stories that you hope for. But when you first start as a cub reporter, your days are often filled with a lot of research and shoe leather reporting on behalf of more significant reporters. You meet a lot of weirdos doing this, but it's exhilarating all the same. In those days, I lived about 5 miles from my office in a rundown flop house where my space was too small and the rent was too large. I didn't have a car at that point and it was a bit too long to walk, so I started taking the bus every day. If you ever want to see the lifeblood of a metropolitan area, take a public bus. I'm not even joking when I say my time on the buses made me a better reporter. You learn the ebb and flow of a place. You meet people, some strange, some very strange, and you see city civic service in action. About 6 months in, when I really started to get the job and the pulse of the city, I was working on a story with a veteran reporter. It was a political scandal and I was about as excited as you can get. Moving into the politics beat is a big deal, and if this story made waves, I could be looking at a real promotion. I was thrilled to get the gig. Every day I got to pick the brains of one of the best in the business and feel them out on how they approach a story, or talk to a witness, or learn how they get people to open up to them. You also get to know every dive bar and greasy spoon downtown. Stories start in these places as rumors before they get research, and blossom into an exclusive article on page 1. They can be a bit sketchy though. Thankfully, the lead reporter, let's call them Pat, was a well-established figure in these locales. Their shadow darkening the door frames was a common sight, especially at the bars. We were having an eye popper, their created phrase for scrambled eggs, bacon, and a shot of whiskey, at a local dive, and I showed up about 10 minutes late. Your drink was getting cold, so I took it. Oh, it's fine. I ordered a coffee at the corner, I said, holding up my Starbucks cup. Hey, don't show that around here. I've got a reputation to uphold, he said, looking around. If you're worried about your man of the people shtick, you'll be fine. Everybody drinks Starbucks every once in a while. They're McCoffee basically. Nothing more salt of the earth is that, I said, taking a sip from my iced coffee. Well, then you drink it, he said, scooping up a forkful of scrambled eggs. Yeah, the bus was a bit behind, I said with a shrug. Nothing I can do about a guy taking 10 minutes putting his bike on the rack. Jesus, you're on the metro? Pat asked, nearly spitting bits of eggs on me. Why? No car and my apartment's too far away, I answered. Oh, I don't miss those days. Please tell me you don't give money to people at bus stops. I mean, sometimes, I said before he cut me off. Yeah, you're getting scammed. Most of those people run games on roofs. I don't think it's as many as you think, I suggested. Nope. I've been around and seen some of them, and they talk. You know that diner on Washington? A lot of the street guys hang there. They share info on who's a mark, especially with regular riders. It was only once or twice, I said, feeling a bit judged. Best advice to tell them is to head to the Mission on Adams Street. They'll get what they need there. Plus, you don't want to give money to a tag-along kid, he said, assuming that I knew what the heck a tag-along kid was. Just then, his phone started ringing, and he went to go talk with somebody else. We had to jet not long after that, so I forgot to follow up with the tag-along kids thing, as we rushed for a clandestine meeting with some minor official. I wish I hadn't. The minor official confirmed his title was all too proper for him and gave us little to nothing to work with. We ran around the rest of the day chasing down phantoms and not finding squat. Before I knew it, the sun had gone down and it was nearly 10. Pat said he'd give me a lift home, but he lived all the way across town and I felt terrible making him go so far out of his way. I said I'd be fine taking the bus back home. They ran pretty late and I was used to it. Pat drove me to the closest stop and said that we would meet for a real coffee in the morning. Looking back, I see a lot of missed red flags about my encounter. Things that I should have questioned a bit more, or paid attention to. I guess hindsight is 20/20, and we all make mistakes. But I take those worse because I'm paid to notice things out of the ordinary or odd. The first thing that struck me as odd was the light at the bus stop started to fritz. Not all the time, but it seemed like every few minutes. It would blink like it was shorting out. You could actually hear the electricity popping. I sat as far away from the light as possible. The second thing I remember being off was feeling cold. It had been warm all day and even after the sun went down, it was still lovely. Not like eggs cooking on the sidewalk hot, but not cold either. Yet at that stop, I could feel an occasional cold spell around me. Also, my phone died. I had at least half a battery the last time that I had checked it, but when I went to glance down at the screen, I saw that it had died on me. Instead of seeing my lock screen background, I saw my face reflected in the black mirror. I cursed and put the useless brick back into my bag. I was about to get up and go check the time at the liquor store near the bus stop, but when I stood up, I saw a small figure in the darkness about 10 feet away. At first, it nearly gave me a heart attack, but once I calmed down from my initial surprise, I noticed the shadow was a kid. They didn't come towards me at first, but just kind of hung back and watched. I put my head on a swivel just in case this was all a setup. I had covered enough robbery stories to know that this is the exact scenario for that. I decided to be bold. "Excuse me," I called out. "Do you need something?" I could see the kid was shifting from side to side, nervous and looking for their voice. Any ideas about them being a front for a gang or something dissolved in front of me. Without taking a step near me, they asked in a soft-spoken and tiny voice, "Is this a stop for the number 12 bus?" "Yes," I said. "It's due any minute." "Oh, okay." "Are you waiting for someone?" They didn't answer. I decided to take a step towards them. "Are you lost?" "Yes," they said back meekly. "But I just needed someone to show me the right bus stop." "Well, this is the right bus stop. I think the bus should be here in about 5 or 10 minutes. "Oh, thank you." The kid was standing alone in the shadows. I could barely make them out with the light flickering. This should have been another warning, but I didn't overthink it. Kids are weirdos sometimes. I felt good that the kid was cautious around strangers. But something was nagging my brain about this kid. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I wanted to follow up with some questions, but I didn't want to scare him. As my mind tried to figure out how to engage without coming across as odd, I heard the bus approaching. I turned back to see the kid and they were gone. I hadn't heard anybody run away or anything. They just disappeared. I assumed they went back to their house or whatever and got on the bus. The rest of the ride home was uneventful, save for a guy doing a horrible rendition of Billie Jean for the last 10 or so minutes. When I got home, my neighborhood was quiet, which was typical for this time of night. I walked over to the front door of my apartment building and stopped cold. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed somebody poking their head out of the alley. When we locked eyes, they pulled their head back into the darkness. My heart started to beat faster. I quickly punched in my code and heard the door buzz open. As I walked in, I heard a kid's voice call out, "Thank you," and then start laughing. I closed the door behind me but peered through the window out into the street. I glanced towards where I had seen the figure in the alley, but I could only see so far from my position. I was just about to turn around and trudge up the 3 flights when I heard running from the alley and saw the blur of somebody darting across the street. In a brief bout of insanity, I had opened the door to chase after them, but as soon as they hit the other side of the dark street, I lost sight of them. I just heard the slap of feet on concrete as they ran away. When I got home, I double-checked my locks and grabbed a baseball bat that I had from last summer's softball league and Go Gazette deadlines, and I kept it in my room. I was a little bit on edge, but not really worried something was going to happen. Even if I had been followed, how the hell would they know what apartment was mine? Even still, I needed to chill out. I rolled a joint and crashed on the couch. I turned on Netflix and picked some random British game show where attractive people sleep with one another until they get kicked out of paradise and greened out. Within a half hour, I had passed out. When I woke up, it was still dark out. I had fallen asleep with my glasses on, and the frames were digging into the bridge of my nose. I took them off and rubbed the indent on my skin when I heard somebody laughing on the street. It wasn't a full-throated guffaw or anything, but more like a playful giggle, like something a kid would do. I made my way to the window that faced the street and peeked out. I scanned around the road and didn't see anyone or anything out there. I was about to head to bed when, out of the corner of my eye, I caught something moving just out of range of the streetlight. It was a person, but as they walked by the lamppost, the light blinked out and went dead. I stayed a few minutes more, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. The sleepy part of my brain convinced my scared part that I was making mountains out of a molehill and just needed to head back to bed. As usual, sleep brain won, and within 10 minutes, I was out. The following day at the office, I found Pat waiting for me with 2 cups of coffee. He nodded as I sat down and slid one of the cups of Joe to me. "Bus issues again?" "I'm on time," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. "Wow, this is good." "I know," he said, smirking. "And for a reporter, being on time is being there 30 minutes early. I got a huge lead on the story. Someone inside the administration is looking to talk. Someone big." I was excited. "Break the story open," I said excitedly. "And break the world open big if they decide to go on the record. They want to meet us and feel us out before they start giving us any information." "How did you pull this?" "I know everyone," Pat said matter-of-factly. It was only a matter of time before somebody spoke up. "They know what's going on is wrong," I said. "And that is what always flips people," Pat said, taking a sip of the coffee. "Outside of socio and psychopaths, most people have an internal altimeter that tells them when they should deploy their safety chute. That's true even with government hacks. You can only swallow so much garbage before you spit it up. I like the parachute metaphor better. Everyone's a critic. Come on, we got some stuff to do. Hopefully not throw it up. Don't get gross on me now. Professionalism always," Pat said with a wink. Within the hour, we were meeting in a place 30 minutes outside of town. A tiny roadside diner that caters to long haulers and families exhausted from travel. We sat in the corner and discussed things like we were talking to a foreign agent. The person, I'll call them Al for security's sake, never burn a source, people. was hesitant to speak and gave us basic one-word answers. Once lunch got there, they became a bit more chatty. Food can do that to a person. It's kind of a well-known secret, Al said, finishing off an onion ring. Nobody questions it because questions lead to demotions and firings. We just let it go on. And the mayor knows about this, Pat asked, himself indulging in an onion ring. Well, the mayor ordered it, Al said, years ago, one of their first acts in office. It flew under the radar because of the policing issues, but it's been on the books for years. Now the act is all well and good, legal if a bit dubious, but the actions of people regarding the act, well, those are gray areas at best. A lot of us have asked the mayor to clamp down on this, but they refuse. A lot of money comes through those lines, you know. Yeah, money makes the world go round, Pat said. Can I ask a question? I said, walking out onto the ledge. I don't think Pat expected me to say much. In fact, based on the look he shot me, I know he didn't. But before I could stop myself, I asked away. How many different departments does the skim happen from? Just a few. All of them. Al laughed, and for a second, I thought that I had screwed the pooch. All of them. A lot of people are lining their pockets with this, and no one is holding the line. The corruption is everywhere. Pat gave me a nod, and I felt good about myself. We chatted for about a half hour more before Al left to get back to the office. Pat and I stayed behind and ordered pie. Key lime was their specialty, and we had some coffee. You did good, Pat said, taking a bite out of the pie. He opened up a bunch of new areas for us to explore. I thought it was limited to only the mayor's office and maybe the police department. But if most of the people are skimming... Thank you, I said, not wanting to blush but feeling it happen anyway. This is a red ball story. Yeah, it's got that vibe, I'll tell you that much. You also just got a whole hell of a lot of New York. We need to know who runs the departments and see if anyone is willing to talk. Start small, then work your way up. If we spook them, we lose them. I nodded and was excited to hit the ground running. We got back to the office and I went to work. I was in one of those crap I missed dinner working sessions where you fail to notice that it's suddenly night and you're starving. So I decided to call it a night. I was going to hurry home, order some Chinese, and get back to my Brit dating show. I needed to decompress from work. I left the building and started walking the dark streets towards the closest bus stop. As I was walking, though, I heard a pair of footsteps walking behind me. Now, I'm not some paranoid hothouse flower, but even I tense up when I hear somebody walking behind me on a dark street. I made sure to hold my keys in between my fingers in case I had to punch someone. As I walked past a trash can on the street, I suddenly heard someone giggling in the alley off to my left. I picked up my pace a bit, but as I passed the dark void between the buildings, I glanced over to see if anything was waiting there. There wasn't. I sighed. Then from behind me, someone or something knocked over the garbage can. The noise scared the crap out of me and I broke out into a full-on run. I heard giggling and footsteps pounding on the pavement right behind me. I hadn't run track in years, but muscle memory kicked in and I was moving. After a decent clip, I decided to stop and spin around to see what was chasing me. When I did, I was surprised to see nothing. Now, the stretch of road that I was running on didn't have any areas that you could quickly duck off to. We were talking storefronts, but everything was closed. Unless this person decided to run in the completely opposite direction, there wasn't anyone near me. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Was I going crazy? Was someone from the city onto our story and wanted to intimidate us? Was I being stalked? None of those answers set me at ease as I stood on a dark street catching my breath. I saw the bus stop up ahead and it felt like my safety zone, like I was a kid playing a game of tag. I convinced myself that if I got there, no harm would come to me. I was sure of it. I know that doesn't make any sense now, but when you've had the heebies meet the jeebies behind you as you ran alone on the street, you make nonsensical agreements with yourself. What was really weird was, as I walked down the street, quicker than my usual pace, every time I passed a light pole, the light flickered. At first, I assumed it was the failing city infrastructure, but it became too apparent that it was a pattern. Was I setting off the lights? I got to the bus stop and took a seat on the cold metal bench. I couldn't stop bouncing my leg. I was still so full of nervous energy. I was ready to fight if I had to, but I was hoping the bus would get here before it got to that. And that's when I heard someone behind me call out. "Excuse me," they said, nearly causing me to jump out of my skin. When I calmed down, I realized that the voice belonged to the kid from the night before. "Was that you chasing me?" I said, suddenly finding my parents' voice. "That wasn't nice." "I wasn't chasing you. I was chasing the thing that was chasing you." My blood went cold. "What?" "You heard it right. Footsteps breathing. It was coming for you and I stopped it by pushing over the trash can." "Why were you laughing?" "I wasn't. It was. It finds your fear funny." But I heard a kid laugh. "Can I have $1 for the bus?" I heard a kid laugh. "It can sound like anything. Can I have $1 for a bus pass? I need to get home." "Where do you live? Where are your parents?" "They're waiting for me at home." "Where is your home?" "Oh, not that far. I saved you. Can't you help me?" The light above me started to buzz and blink. I felt a cold breeze blow by me even though it was as still as a grave that night. Off in the distance, I heard the bus rounding the corner. "I helped you. Can you help me?" the little voice said. I reached into my wallet and fished out a 5. "Thank you," I said, holding the bill out. The little figure moved out of the shadows. They were slight, barely there even, and pale. As they got closer, I felt another cool breeze across my face. The light above flickered and I finally caught a glimpse of their face. The little girl's eyes were black, startlingly so. Her skin was so white that her eyes stood out like somebody had shined a light on them. I only saw them for a minute because the overhead light flickered out, but they were haunting. As the little girl took the bill, she dragged her nail across my wrist and broke the skin. She laughed and ran away from me. As the bus pulled up, she had disappeared into the shadows. She never got on. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind the rest of the night. It even ruined a Brit date. It was bothering me. What was following me? How long had whoever or whatever been hanging around me? Was it natural or supernatural? What about that little girl? Who was she and why did she keep popping up near the bus but never actually riding the bus? Why were her eyes so black? Every time I closed my eyes, I could see her face staring at me. Those doll eyes, unnatural and cold, and her smile. Was she one of Pat's tag-along kids? I knew I needed to find out. I pulled out my phone and gave him a call. I knew it was late, but I also knew that he'd probably be up, nursing a drink somewhere. "Do you know what time it is?" Pat said as he picked up the phone. "Sorry, I know it's late," I said quickly, moving to diffuse the anger. "But I have a question for you. This couldn't wait until the morning. You remember a couple of days ago when you mentioned a tag-along kid to me?" "Well, vaguely," Pat said. "Why?" What exactly are tag-along kids? There was a long pause. What's going on? Nothing, I mean. I started before he cut me off. You don't call this late for nothing. Is something following you? I don't know. Pat sighed. You didn't give anyone money, did you? I didn't want to tell him, but I finally croaked out a small yes. Oh God. What did the kid say? That something was following me and they were going to. And then I heard a giggle on the street outside my apartment. Going to what? I moved to the window and peered out the side of my curtains to not signal anything down there. At first look, there wasn't a soul. But then I saw a streetlight start to flicker. My eyes focused on the dark and I saw them. The little girl was standing in the shadows outside my apartment. Hey, what's wrong? The girl, she's outside my apartment. Is she alone? I glanced around. I think so, I don't see anyone else. Good, Pat said. Sometimes they travel in packs. I'm sorry, what? Listen to me. Whatever happens, do not leave your apartment. Do not open the door for anyone regardless of what they say. Why? Because something wants into your place. What for? They want you. Why? You don't want to find out. I'm going to head over with somebody that can help. How will I know it's you? I'll say a password. Banana Tuesday. You hear me say Banana Tuesday, it's me. Well, what should I do in the meantime? Nothing. Don't open the door, don't engage, don't do anything. And for God's sake, don't let anything touch you. I stayed quiet. She didn't touch you, did she? Well, she scratched my wrist when I gave her the money. I heard Pat pull the phone away from his mouth and swear loudly, and then he got back on. Just stay calm and wait for me. If you have salt, put some in all the corners of your apartment. A little pile, nothing crazy. Just calm down. Just calm down, I thought. Sure. Why hadn't I thought of that? I know Pat was going to help. How, I didn't know. But I couldn't help but feel like that was a band-aid on a gunshot wound. Still, I thanked him and I hung up the phone. I walked back to the window and I peered outside. The night was still, and the light was no longer flickering. From an outsider's perspective, it looked like a typical urban night. I sighed and moved away from the window. As soon as I was about to plant myself on the couch and not move until I heard the words, Banana Tuesday, I suddenly couldn't remember if I had locked my door. If something wanted to come in here, I should probably not only lock it but wedge something under the crack to make sure that they can't easily break in. I deadbolted and chain-locked my apartment door before dropping to the ground to cram that wedge into the door frame when I saw a shadow darken outside my door. I froze and tried to hold my breath. Somebody was only a thin, low-rent apartment quality door away from me. I'm not religious, but I said a silent prayer in case I needed some divine help. There was a giggle and then they sprinted off. As the figure ran down the hallway, I could hear the lights buzz until they burst. Glass shattered all down the hall as the footsteps just disappeared. I rolled away from the door and hid behind the couch. Suddenly the TV turned on, and I could hear my favorite British dating show, and I nearly had a heart attack. It's not that my sensibilities had been breached, but I had paused the screen when I called, but something had just turned it on. Turns out that person was me. In my mad scramble to the couch, I had hit play on the remote on accident. I blurted out laughter, I couldn't help it. But that laughter turned into tears. Stress was getting to me. I hit pause again and tried to collect myself. My cheeks were slick with tears, and before I could wipe them away, the cut in my wrist started burning. It felt like somebody had pressed an iron down onto the wound. I dashed over to the sink and ran water over it, but it didn't seem to do anything. What the hell? I yelled through gritted teeth. How can this get any worse? That's when the power in my apartment shut off. I hunched down low for reasons that I still don't understand. If this thing had the power to shut off my power, surely it could see me slithering along the ground. But I didn't care how it looked. My brain had shifted into autopilot, and my actions were coming from some deep animal part of my gray matter. I crawled out of my kitchen and back towards the couch. I kept my eyes on the door to see if I could see anything move in the dark. My eyes were adjusting, and what was impossible to see a few moments ago was now coming into view. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps stomping down the hall. They started near the stairs and stopped right in front of my door. I held my breath and waited for what the hell would happen next. I felt a cool breeze move past me, and I saw my hair move with it. I clenched my whole body and started trembling in fear. I heard and then saw something being pushed under the crack in the door. It was a small piece of paper. I watched as whoever was on the other side forced it all the way into my apartment, and then I heard a giggle and the footsteps run away from my door. I gathered every bit of courage that I had and I crawled to the door. Even with the locks, I was afraid something would come barreling through and snatch me up. As I got closer, the small piece of paper came into view and I instantly knew what it was. It was the $5 bill that I gave the girl. Suddenly, the TV flipped on and nearly gave me a heart attack. I wasn't near the remote this time. Something else had turned it on. Worse, there was no sound coming out. And then the screen started to flicker and the sound of static came out of the speakers. As I watched in horror, I saw a pair of black eyes slowly fade onto the screen until it was all that I could see. Through the static, I heard the faint and soft voice of the little girl. She was saying, "I can see you. You're in my home. I saved you. Let me in. You're my parent now." And then the giggling. I shut my eyes and started to scream when suddenly the TV shut off, but the rest of my apartment sprang back to life. I slowly opened my eyes to see my ordinary, crappy apartment. Looking at the fiver, I noticed that the eyes of Lincoln had been covered in what looked like blood. I decided then that I would burn that bill and send it back to hell. There was a knock on my door. "It's Pat," the voice on the other side said. "Hey, I got here as soon as I could. Open up. I have somebody here who can help you." "Pat," I said, finding my voice. "Is it you?" "Of course it's me. Who the hell else would come over this late?" "What's the password?" "What?" "The password you gave me, what is it?" "Are we really going to do this?" "You're in serious trouble and I can help. Just let me in." "What is the password?" I said slowly. And they were silent for a bit and then Pat said, "Banana sundae." A cool sweat enveloped my body. Whatever this was, it wasn't Pat. I felt tears run down my face. I collected myself and just eked out, "That's wrong." And then all hell broke loose. The person started banging on my door and screaming. My light bulbs all buzzed until they burst, sending shards of glass everywhere. My TV turned on and off. I could hear my neighbors' doors opening and slamming shut, children crying, people screaming, and giggling. The giggling over everything. I shut my eyes to try to drown it out, but it didn't do anything. I opened them and saw the $5 bill lift off the ground and float around the room like a tornado had picked it up. Suddenly, over the chaos, I heard Pat yell, "Hey!" from the stairwell. Everything stopped in an instant. The $5 bill was suspended in the air until, like a heat-seeking missile, it flew through the crack and back into the hallway. I heard little footsteps run in the opposite direction. "It's Pat! Banana Tuesday, Banana Tuesday!" I pulled myself up from the floor, opened the door, and was relieved to see Pat standing there. I collapsed into his arms and cried. The other person that was with him was some sort of priest or a former priest. They spent hours cleansing my house, my wound, my aura, burning sage and salting rooms, all that odd stuff. Pat stayed with me for most of the night. We talked as the priest did his cleansing. He really calmed me down, and I'm forever grateful for our friendship. After a while, I finally asked him about the tag-along kids. He sighed. "When I first started years ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, I was working a story about local legends. It was mostly bunk, a fun story for Halloween. But some of the people that I spoke to believed it, especially people who had had encounters with the tag-along kids," they said with a sigh. Pat paused, and I could see his whole demeanor shift. A real fear from deep down in his soul was forcing its way up to the surface. "Can I smoke in here?" "I don't care." He lit up a smoke and took a drag. Exhaling a plume of smoke, he continued, "I thought it'd be fun if I went to where people reported seeing the kids. The bus lines at night, out-of-the-way gas stations, that kind of thing, to see if I could experience it for myself. Bring a little bit of myself into the story. I found a kid, but I didn't know what I was messing around with. Let's just say my little encounter didn't make the piece, because if it had, my editor would have thought that I was on shrooms." "Are they demons?" He didn't say yes, but didn't dispute it either. "The kids cling too, especially if they make contact. And that little scratch, it scars." He held up his hand, and I noticed a jagged scar across the back of it. He nodded to the priest. "They'll be back 2 or 3 times to make sure you're clear. That's the scary part, thinking you're over this and suddenly having it roar back into your life. And now I know why you said to never give anybody money for the bus," I said, forcing a smile. Pat laughed. "No, I tell you that because I'm cheap. But never give your money to a black-eyed ghoul, okay? I keep bailing you out, even I need my beauty rest." They left as the sun was starting to rise. We were supposed to meet another contact from the mayor's office, but Pat pushed the meeting and let me rest. When I finally crashed out, I was out for a good 15 hours. We published the story, and it helped to launch my career. I don't tell people about my encounter with the tag-along kids. No reason to bring it up. As Pat said, unless you experience it, people think you're nuts when you talk about it. However, I always keep an eye open for them, especially when I'm on the bus. Once it happens to you, you never really forget it. Every flickering light gives you pause. Every giggle you hear could potentially be a harbinger of doom. It changes you. I hear that the new administration wants to improve public transit, put more lights at the stops, run the buses more often, that sort of thing. Whatever pushes those kids further into the shadows is A-okay with me. You stop the tag-along kids from harassing passengers, you've got my vote. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. A lot of people aren't aware of how much they spend each month. And do you know how many subscriptions you pay for? What about how much you spend on takeout or delivery? It's probably more than you think. But there's an app designed to help you manage your money better. Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. If you've got a goal that you'd like to save for, Rocket Money can analyze your accounts to find the best time each month to put extra money aside. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. The app automatically scans your bills to find opportunities to save and then goes to work to get you better deals. They'll even talk to customer service so that you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps today. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. A couple of truths for you before I begin my story. Litherlax lives in the puddle on the Westwoods back lane. This is truth. Every kid north of the river knows it is such. And I can see what you're thinking. I know what comes to mind when I use the word puddle. A small, shallow patch of water at the edge of a path maybe. Something to step into for a little splash. Well, Litherlax's puddle is nothing like this. Sprawling and vast, it covers an entire stretch of the aforementioned back lane, overgrown and bordered with mossy green rotted fence. And it's always there, always. Even at the end of the warmest summer days, the hottest, driest summer weeks, the puddle remains. It never shrinks or evaporates. And when it rains, it bloats and swells to truly monstrous size. Like a lake more than anything else. It's raining now, actually. The drops fall thick and fast onto the surface of Litherlax's puddle. Another truth for you. Litherlax steals children. We don't know why and we don't know what for, but he takes them on their way home from school. At night sometimes, and they never come back. We walk in groups for that very reason. Even the unpopular kids, the loners, we all walk in little squads. We make detours and take illogical routes to ensure that everyone has someone else beside them right up into their own street. Because of these measures, there aren't really any loners or unpopular kids anymore, which is nice, I guess. A shame about the circumstances, but it is what it is. I tighten my grip on my baseball bat, a low-grade weapon to be sure, but I lack the courage to take a knife from the rack in the kitchen. A curious thing for me to say, I guess, considering that I now stand at the entrance to the home of a monster. But I would rather this than have to face my mother and justify the thievery of a knife. It's a different kind of courage, I guess. Parker stands to my left. He rubs at a band-aid on his elbow. The rain splashes on the peak of his cap. Faded blue, gone gray with age. He wields a hammer, taken from his dad's toolbox, I guess. I doubt the man would care. Lauren stands to my right, hair tied back and beneath the plastic yellow of a raincoat. She holds a hockey stick like a staff in her left hand. She looks at me, her deep brown eyes full of anxiety. It feels weird being here, as a group of three. Our fourth has been taken by Litherlax. He has been taken away like so many before him, into the depths of the puddle on the Westwoods back lane. I take in a deep breath of the chilled, wet late afternoon air. I turn to the boys behind us. Their names aren't important for now, but they're a couple of grades above us. Bullies, basically. The types who enjoy harassing others for their own amusement. But there is no harassment today. They stand as a solemn trio, dutiful sentinels. The boy in the front steps forwards. I saw your friend leave off by himself. I could have called out to him. I could have made the decision to walk with him, but I didn't. I chose not to, and he was taken. I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry to all of you. I nod in return but say nothing as the rain falls fast all around. I know all of this already, of course, but I allow him to speak. We'll stand guard here until the sun sets. We can't stay any longer than that. You know this, Eric. I nod for a second time but still say nothing. We'll keep you safe. Nothing will follow you down and nothing sick will come back up. We'll stand guard. He pauses. I hope you find your friend. The wind blows. I murmur a grave but genuine thank you in reply and turn back to the great puddle. We are surrounded by trees here and a misty haze borders the edges of our vision. It gives the back lane an unsettling, otherworldly quality. Here we go then, I guess. Parker mutters to my left. He gives the band-aid on his arm a last rub, smoothing it back into place and holds the hammer tight in his hand. He's scared. We all are. No one goes down after Litherlax. I mean, it's insane. Insane, and yet enough is enough. If we don't try and put a stop to this now, then when? Our friend has been taken and he needs to be saved. It's as simple as that. Benny. His name is Benny. Parker takes a step and then another, and then with a splash, his foot comes down into the water at the edge of the puddle. Lauren stirs beside him and a shiver of goosebumps shoot up across my arms. We're actually doing this. We're going down after Litherlax. Parker pauses for a moment, gathering himself perhaps, and then calmly and coolly he continues his walk. About 7 or 8 feet into the puddle we watch as he starts to descend. As if marching down unseen steps, he sinks lower and lower into the water. It comes up to his knees and then to his waist, and still he descends. It's a bizarre spectacle, but it's what we were expecting. Parker starts to freak out as the water reaches his chest, and I don't blame him, to be fair. He panics and the illusion is immediately lost. He stumbles and slips in the water. There's a great splash and he is momentarily obscured by a flurry of white spray, and then there he is, lying on his chest in the puddle. A puddle which really doesn't seem all that deep at all. He grumbles angrily to himself and rises to a stand, repositioning his cap. The water which mere seconds ago came up to his chest now barely covers his feet. He starts to splash back towards us as he drips from the front of his shirt. I'm sorry, he says through the rain. It was harder than I thought it would be. It's okay, I reply. You lost focus is all. You have to forget the water is there, just keep going down. Easier said than done though, obviously. I think to myself as my heart pounds in anticipatory fear. Parker stops as he returns to our side and he looks at me. Lauren does the same. The implication is clear. It's my turn to try. I squirm but steady my nerves. All right, here we go, I say quietly and then set out across the grass and into the waters of the puddle. A little quicker than I should perhaps, but I'm trying to stave off the urge to turn and run back the opposite way. Any second now, any second. I try not to react as I feel my foot come down lower than one would expect into the shimmering water, reflecting gray the overcast sky up above. I keep pace, fist clenched, breathing steady, and down I go, step by step. The water rises up to my knees, step by step, up to my waist and then up to my chest. This is how far Parker was able to get. But I am able to go further. The water rises up to my neck. It's cold, it's so cold. The rain is loud against the water beside my ears. I take a breath and I close my eyes, and my head dips below the surface. I keep walking down. The sound of the rain is muffled and grows quickly fainter and fainter above me. The water feels thin somehow, not quite as thick as water is supposed to be. down and down, step by step. I try releasing my breath as I descend. I feel nor hear no bubbles come rushing from my lips, so I try for a cautious intake and find that I am able. I open my eyes, and I come to the bottom of the stairs. Ahead stretches a long, straight, and wide corridor, grand, like the kind you would find in a mansion. The walls are a deep, rich red-brown, and the carpet is a moss-like green. I lift a hand and examine myself. The sensation is a curious one, as my movements have definitely been dulled, and the objects caught in my line of sight waver ever so steadily. But my motion still feels closer to amidst air than amidst water, if that makes any sense to you. I turn around. My vision wobbles gently as I do so. After a second or two it is settled, and I see behind me a set of wide and imposing stairs. They ascend up and up to the shimmering and through the shimmering watery veil-like ceiling. Whoa. A set of feet appear through this veil. Down they come to be followed by a plastic yellow raincoat. Lauren. Her eyes are screwed tight shut and she's clearly holding her breath. But as she draws closer and closer to the bottom of the stairs, she cautiously opens an eye and then another. Seeing me standing here as I am, she finds the courage to try breathing and finds that she is able to. "This is so weird, Eric," she murmurs. Her voice is a little distorted. She walks across the grass-like carpet to the nearest wall and looks up at the paintings that are hung there. "Have you seen these?" I've noticed them but haven't studied them closely. They hang at regular intervals and trail all the way down both walls and into the corridor's far distance. I step up beside her for a closer look. The painting, and indeed all the paintings by the look of it, are of children. The one in front of Lauren and I is of a girl, about 12 or 13 in age. I don't think she's from this decade. I would certainly raise an eyebrow if I saw somebody on the street with such a hairstyle and curious choice in clothes. Parker had made his way down the stairs now. He tugs his hat a little tighter down onto his head, afraid perhaps that it's going to float away. What the hell is this place? He wonders aloud. It's certainly not quite what we were expecting. "Come on," I say to them. "Let's get moving." And so we do. We start to walk down the long level corridor illuminated by quaint chandeliers hung up against the ceiling. Our shadows, many as they are, seem to ripple softly against the carpet. I look at the paintings as we pass them by, nerves racing. The more we pass, the more the clothes and styles start to become familiar. Some of the kids look as young as 5, some like the first girl in their mid-teens, but none of them are smiling. They look out at us passers-by with expressions of longing and loneliness. They're haunting in their authenticity. It's subtle at first and it takes a while for us to notice, but after about 15 or 20 minutes of walking, it becomes clear that the carpet is longer than it was before. Even wilder, it sprouts up in places like grass or weeds, like moss drifting in a river. As we walk, this weed-like grass rises higher. It reaches our knees as the corridor comes at last to an end, 40 or 50 minutes from the stairs. The corridor opens and widens into a great hall. Pillars tempered with iris and watery green ferns mark the corners. A pedestal of chipped white stone stands in the center, and the carpet reaches almost to its peak. "There's something coming," Lauren murmurs, and the hairs on the back of my arms bristle and rise. We huddle a step closer together, us 3 warriors beneath the puddle on the Westwood's back lane. Movements catch my eye, but I can't tell if it's legitimate or a trick of our shimmering surroundings. The grass-like weeds of the carpet waver in the thick wet of the breezeless air. Anxiety rises. Parker tightens his grip on the hammer, a motion that makes noise. Lauren starts to nervously hum a little tune. It's a habit of hers. Her reasoning is that characters in horror movies are never taken or killed while singing an upbeat tune. This evening, she has chosen the theme to the old sitcom, Perfect Strangers. We listen to the melody as we await the arrival of some monstrosity from one of the off-shooting corridors. Litherlax himself, perhaps. Who knows? Parker eventually snaps. "Cut it out already, Lauren, you're not helping." She does so wordlessly, and I can almost feel the flood of regretful, immediate guilt flowing out of Parker and into the hall. "I'm sorry," he says at once. "I'm just nervous is all." "It's okay," she says. There's another long pause, rich with tension, and I pick up the tune where Lauren left off. Whistling, she joins in, as does Parker, and we begin to push deeper into the hall, steadily approaching the pedestal in the center. The snake appears when we're about 3 or 4 feet away. A deep, greenish gray, it blends in well with the surrounding grass, and we come to an instant stop as it slithers out from the weeds. Around the pedestal it goes and goes, around and around until it is coiled upon its perch, staring down at us with 2 unblinking golden eyes. Its tongue flickers briefly out and then retracts at once. It looks from Parker to Lauren and then to me. It opens its mouth, and I found myself curiously unsurprised to hear it speak. Its voice is deeper than I would have expected for such a creature, and its tone is low and steady. "You have made a mistake in coming here, children," the snake tells us. Its tongue flickers out again. "Others have crept below in search of friends and family. You are not the first." "Were they successful?" I asked the reptile. "Did they save their friends from Litherlax? For this creature is not the great he. I feel it on an intuitive level." "Litherlax lives," the snake replies. With respect, that is not what I asked. The snake uncoils a little, slowly lowering its head a few inches closer towards me. I stand my ground, but both he and I notice the adjustment of the hammer in Parker's hand to my left. "I wouldn't try it, boy," the snake says to him. "I may be large, but I am the quicker by far. You would be dead before the weapon was even raised." "Have you seen our friend?" Lauren interjects, her soft tone diffusing the tension by a degree or two. "Our friend Benny." The snake pauses. He turns to her and tilts his head in thought. Benny. Is that the name you say?" "Yes." The snake's tongue darts out and flickers before us. He pulls back with a sigh. "I am afraid you are simply too late. Litherlax dawdles not. It is too late. Your friend has been drained. Turn back, lest the same fate befall the 3 of you. Please, turn back." My heart pounds with panic, but I step forward, pointing a finger at the creature on the pedestal. "No," I say, "that can't be right. Benny's braver than all of us. She's the best of us. She would never let herself get drained." "Alas, I saw it with my own eyes. She is gone. Turn back while you can. Litherlax roams these corridors." My heart rate settles just a little. He fell for the trick. I lower my hand to give the snake a quick, dry grimace. "I think you're lying to us, reptile. You don't seem to know much about human names. Benny isn't a she. Benny is a he. Your eyes may be unblinking, but I think you saw nothing." The snake adjusts his position and hisses from the back of his throat. "So we're going to continue on our way. If you try to stop us, and then we'll fight you. I don't want to do that, and neither do you. So let's just go our separate ways and in good faith." The snake raises his head. "You are foolish. Danger and despair await you down these corridors. I implore you to turn back and save yourself the heartache and the pain." "We aren't going to turn back," says Parker. "We won't." "Then you are doomed," replies the snake, and down he goes. Uncoiling down the pedestal, he creeps back into the grass of the carpet and slithers away, quickly lost to sight amongst the weeds. 3 further corridors branch away from this hall, and the one that leads ahead seems as good a choice to take as any. So we soldier on, pushing through the green, as Litherlax awaits in the deep. We round the central stone column and leave the hall behind, marching onwards down the overgrown corridor. We do not dwell on the rumbling that echoes behind and beyond the ornate walls. Drained, Lauren murmurs after a while. That's what the snake said. Well, the snake was lying, Parker replies. If he had actually seen Benny, then he wouldn't have fallen for Eric's trick. No, Lauren says. I mean drained, like, what did he mean by drained? Parker has no answer. Probably best to not think about it, I said quietly as the kids in the portraits watch us pass by. Lauren murmurs in reluctant agreement. The corridor stretches on. The ever-present threat of our limited time presses against the back of my head. Litherlax's puddle can only be entered towards the day's end, but when the sun sets and night falls, that's when the creatures return to the water. The clock ticks, and as if in response to these thoughts, a distant and watery voice echoes down from the ceiling. It reverberates softly through the walls. The voice of one of the sentinel trio up above and guarding the puddle. Eric! Comes the faraway voice, and we pause to listen. The creatures have begun their crawl to the water. We can keep them back for now, but they're coming. Be as quick as you can, bro. We hasten along, hearts pounding in tune. The corridor rounds a corner and ends abruptly at a dining room of sorts. There is a deserted bandstand in the corner and a podium for a non-existent server to welcome the guests. The tables are many and they are draped in lily pad leaf-like cloth. Half the walls are covered in portraits, but only half. The walls further ahead, through all the visible open doorways, are bare. Parker gently knocks my arm with the butt of his hammer and points, and we follow his gaze. A short, squat figure facing away from us hums softly to himself in the corner of the dining room. He's a painter of some kind, working away at a sheet of rich paper stretched across an easel canvas. With nerves of steel, we creep through the room, the sound of our slow movements dulled by the thickness of the air around us. Closer we approach, closer and closer, and it becomes apparent that the figure is no man. What we had mistaken for a gray jacket is merely the shading of his slimy skin that is tinged and tipped in green. His feet are webbed and legs bowed. He is, proportionally speaking, an enormous frog, though one no taller than I. I nod to Parker and the boy reaches out. He grabs the frog roughly by the shoulder. The amphibian promptly squeals in distress and is shoved to the ground. His paintbrushes go clattering to the floor and the sharpened side of Parker's hammer is pressed against his neck. Lauren's hockey stick and my own bat are pointed right down to his face as his bulging eyes dart from person to person. He croaks and struggles. "What are you doing here?" he blurts. "You aren't victims. Unhand me, filth." "Where's our friend? And don't mess with us. We already dealt with your pal the snake." Parker is careful to leave our interaction ambiguous, and the frog's eyes widen in fear. "Who?" he stutters his words. "Who is your friend?" "Benny." "Benny?" "He's the one in your painting," says Lauren softly. With a chill, I turn to look. The painting is only half finished. There remains a great deal of shadow and realism still to be added, but the portrait's occupant is clear. It's Benny, all right. The frog's eyes flicker from Lauren to the painting and back. "The others will be here soon," he murmurs. "They will take you to Litherlax, if he hasn't found you already." The walls rumble. "Where is he?" I reiterate. "The boy in your painting. We aren't leaving until we find him." The frog's throat swells anxiously, throbbing. "You are too late. By the time the painting's finished, the boy will be drained. Well, then we aren't too late, are we? I reply coolly. It isn't a question. Your painting remains unfinished. The frog struggles, but Lauren presses the hockey stick against his slippery green skin, and Parker adjusts his distribution of weight. I lean in closer. We'll kill you if we have to, slave of Litherlax. I didn't want to kill this thing. I have no desire to, and probably wouldn't if it came down to it. But if scaring him will make him tell us where to find our friend, then so be it. The frog whimpers in dismay. If he doesn't get his victims, he whispers, then he comes for us, the pond folk. We do what we have to do, child. Which way? The frog's eyes dart to one of the off-shooting corridors and I nod. He'll drain you, the frog squeaks. That's a risk we're happy to take. This next part gives me no pleasure, but we can't afford to take any risks. These creatures from otherworldly domains, they speak in riddles and half-truths, I'm sure of it. By the time that the painting is finished, the boy will be drained. Lauren, I say, pin his arms. Lauren presses forwards with the hockey stick and puts all her weight upon it, trapping the hands and arms of the frog above his head against the mossy green ground. Wait, no, let me go, he struggles in panic. I'm sorry, I say, but your painting, is it connected to the fate of the children? The frog does not respond. I clench my jaw. The painting, is it important? Is there anything more that we need to know? The frog stares back at me defiantly, silently, angrily. Parker speaks up. What if we were to break your hands, huh? What if you couldn't finish the portrait? No, shrieks the frog. Don't. And his tongue darts out from his mouth like a fist, slapping wetly into Parker's eye. The boy cries out and reaches up for it, freeing the frog's neck from the hammer. The frog shifts and kicks out, knocking Lauren back with a powerful leg, and with the sharper traction of his tongue, he's free. I jump for him, but the creature is too slippery. He pushes me off and bounds away through the halls, croaking and warbling and warning as loud as he can. There's no way that we'll be able to catch up. Each of his hops might as well have been 10 paces or more. I point to the easel as my heart races. Grab that painting. Already on it, Lauren replies as she rolls it up and stuffs it into her coat. By doing so, another picture on the floor besides the easel is knocked over. This one looks complete but for its framing. I don't get a good look at it before it lands, however, and it is quickly obscured from sight. Hey, let's get a move on. If they didn't know that we were here before, they do now. Come on, this way. And together we run down the route that the frog implied, out from the dining hall and past a multitude of curious rooms. One contains a garden of sorts, another a collection of statues. The air seems to grow thicker as we run. It becomes harder and harder to push our limbs forward and onwards. Our run slows into a jog, even at full effort. God, I murmur through grunts. It shouldn't be this difficult. We push on into another wide hall. No tables in this one though, just a statue of a grim-faced toad, blindfolded and wielding in its hand a set of scales held in precarious balance. They've started getting through, guys, comes that distant and distorted voice from the world above. There's too many, we can't stop them all. Hurry, they're coming. I study the statue. The scales are held at an angle and each of the weighing pans point down a different corridor. We're close now, I can feel it, and there's a choice to be made. I let out a low sigh and adjust my stance, and as I do so, a curious thing happens. A trickle of bubbles escapes my lips and drifts up high, where they are lost in the shimmering light of the ceiling. There's a pause as both Parker and Lauren stare in horror, and Parker drops his hammer in fear. It falls slower than it should. Bubbles start pouring from his mouth as he gasps. There's no air, he cries out. and it seems for a terrible moment as if his suspension of disbelief is lost. For him, the illusion is broken. How are we even able to breathe down here? I can't get in any. He falls to his knees and clutches his throat, rasping. It's just water, he shrieks. Water! Parker, Lauren and I crouch down beside him. You can talk, you can breathe. We're doing so now and you can do the same. It's thick and it's wet, but it's air. Come on, breathe in and out. Parker's face is turning red. He panics, spluttering and choking. Come on, breathe in and out. And he struggles. He tries to match our breathing. To do so at first, it causes him great distress. But he calms himself down and the bubbles slow their streaming. His breathing slowly syncs up with ours and gradually he regains control. A minute or more perhaps and the bubbles stop entirely. Parker wipes a sheen of sweat from his forehead. I've cost us time. I'm sorry. Hey, it's alright, I say to him. But he is right. We raise our heads as the statue before us starts to shake. A voice rumbles through the walls, but this is not the voice of any of the teenagers up above, of the trio guarding the puddle, nor of any low frog or snake. This is a voice much lower, much darker, much angrier. The voice sends a tremor of dreamlike fear pouring and splashing like cascading waves through my body. It is his voice, I'm certain, as it surely can be the voice of no other. Litherlax.
Intruders. Intruders in my hall. I smell your blood, children of the surface. Dawdle not. Face me if you would face me. Come meet your end and be done with it.
I turn to the corridor on the right, almost instinctively. That's where he is. Litherlax awaits down the corridor to the right. But down the corridor to the left, there is movement. A person, a child. There's another child down here in this place. A small girl, maybe just over half our age, peers anxiously around the corner, one hand pressed to the wall as she looks us over uncertainly. Hey, are you okay? I call out to her. She panics. She slips and stumbles and turns. The disheveled nature of her hair and clothes is made briefly clear and she disappears away. Come back, Lauren shouts, but the girl does not. Lauren starts to go after her, and then stops, pausing and looking to me. They both do, her and Parker. I glance from corridor to corridor, and at the statue between them.
Time ticks away,
rumbles the ethereal voice of Litherlax from the depths of the unknown.
Come now or never.
Eric? Lauren asks desperately. What do we do? I fumble for the words. Time ticks indeed. If we go after Litherlax, then we will likely never see the girl again, so she'll be doomed down here. But if she has survived down here for so long already, then who's to say she won't survive a little bit longer? But you don't know how long she's been down here, Eric. They might be hunting her at this exact moment. She's younger than Benny, though. Far younger. What chance does she have alone? Hell, maybe it's a trap. My decision, however, is made for me. It is made for me, and I do not have to stress the guilt of choosing one over another. Parker breaks off from the group, reaching down and grabbing up his hammer, running as fast as he's able given our surroundings. He heads down the corridor to the left after the girl. Turning back over his shoulder, he shouts, "Go find Benny. Don't wait up for me. Just save him and get yourselves out of here. Go!" He disappears from sight around the corner. I grab Lauren by the sleeve of her raincoat and drag her to the right, and together we run in desperate pursuit of our friend and the monster that took him below. The thick green-gray of the carpet reeds and watergrass is now almost waist-high, and it brushes wetly against us as we push on through the corridor, ignoring the occasional bursts of bubbles dispelled from our movements through the undergrowth. The air is thick now and heavy. The walls, as grand as they are slimier. The reek of the place grows stronger and stronger as we pass by room after room. The reek is Litherlax, I'm sure of it, and we're close now. Every time we round a corner, I think that this might be it. This might be the one, but the corridors stretch maddeningly on. They are coming, echoes the voice of our guardians above the surface of the puddle. The pond folk return to the puddle. Do you think that'll be okay? Lauren pants breathlessly. Parker, do you think you'll be alright without us? I don't know. We gotta focus on Benny first. One hurdle at a time, we go for Benny. The light is changing ahead. Since the beginning, an aura of subtle blue-green has tinted our surroundings, but that ends at the next corridor. Viscous red shadows are thrown from stone ornaments against the walls. As I breathe in, I can taste the faint tang of something metallic and bitter. Lauren shoots me a glance. I read her mind in the expression. Litherlax. We slow to a cautious stop, hearts pounding, and creep around the final corner, ducking behind a statue of an eel, coiled and silent. My innards clench in revulsion at the sight that lies ahead. The corridor ends in the largest room so far, a great and kingly hall with a single long table that extends almost from wall to wall. The wild grass-like life of the carpet is less obvious in here. The floors are clearly carefully maintained and often trimmed. There are windows in the wall, the first that I've seen, but beyond the colorful stained glass is only gently swirling watery mist. Each window is flanked by statues of Litherlax himself, and the great table is covered sickeningly and carelessly in the bodies of his victims. I feel a sharp pain and realize that Lauren is, perhaps unconsciously, clenching my hand in terror. The bodies have indeed been drained. There's no other word for it. Drained, as warned the snake, as warned the frog. They are all children, and they are all long dead. Their eyes look blindly out at nothing from the hollows of their heads. They are little more than veinless skins of white and gray, pulled taut across the skeletons within, piled and sprawled across the tablecloths from end to end. My teeth clench hard and I raise my gaze. The frog is here too, beyond the table at the far side of the room. His shadows are many and red, cast from the ruby chandelier that hangs overhead. His neck is craned back. He croaks and throws out his arms and pleads with the very creature that we have come all this way to see, the colossus upon his enormous throne of cold and mossy red stone. He is Litherlax, a bulging, leaking, and writhing leech. Monstrous in size, his squirming sends ripples of disgusting noise reverberating around the walls. Slimy and shiny and black, he pulsates grotesquely, and the reddish light from the chandelier catches in the faint scarlet markings that run all the way down his various segments. His middle is thickened and bloated and heaving, and the only distinguishing feature that differentiates his head from his tail is a throbbing, distended ring coated in black ooze that now hangs menacingly above the quivering, pleading frog.
But it makes no sense for monocles.
The great leech warbles. His mouth does not move in time to the words, rather they seem to seep from the membrane of his very skin.
I do not understand how they found the strength to breathe. You assured me that the air was thicker than human children could handle, when forced to exertion.
It should be. Oh, Litherlax, the great drainer. They must have tricks. They are sneaks, arrogant and stupid. Litherlax's voice drops an octave. His wet and pulsing mouth lowers closer to the anxious frog.
I ask not for excuses. Tell me at the least, did you finish the portraits? Are they ready for hanging in my gallery?
For monocles, the frog squirms from leg to leg. I finished the first, Litherlax King. The girls. Litherlax rumbles and he draws back, ooze leaking from his ring of lips and onto his throne with a splatter.
That won't do then. For now.
Lauren and I exchange a fearful look. The girl, does he mean the young one in the corridor? The one that Parker ran after? Our question is answered immediately, however, and we are wrong. Litherlax slithers round in a quick half circle, his lower body thrumming excitedly as he reaches up to the high ceiling. We follow his movements and gasp. Lauren slams a hand over her mouth. I can't believe that we didn't see them sooner. In cages colored in the same patterns at the ceiling, hung from great long chains, are two children. A girl of about 14, and Benny.
Bring the cages around and open the first.
Fermonicles darts to the edge of the room and pulls on a great gray lever, freeing a metal wheel in the wall which he then spins around in a slippery grip. With a great clank and grinding of gears unseen, the cages, following some kind of rusted rail, jerk awkwardly along their routes and closer to the center of the room, above the great table. Eric, Lauren hisses, what are we going to do? But I don't know. I don't know what to do. The cage with the teenage girl in starts to descend, swinging on its chain as it does so, and then 6 or so feet above the table, the floor of the cage slams open, and the girl falls screaming to the pile of corpses below. And with a speed surprising for his bulbous and bloated size, Litherlax darts forward. His gray-black oozy ring of lips peels sickeningly back to reveal 3 pinkish-gray beak-like jaws. Please, the girl cries out in panic, bubbles pouring from her mouth as she throws up her hands in meager defense. But she stands no chance. Litherlax's fangs, each no bigger than my own fist, munch deliriously into her side, and with a squirt of blood, she is brought down writhing. The creature's lips roll back over the fangs to fix like suckers on the girl's side, and in the space of no more than 10 seconds, he drains her. His body pulsates as great gulps of blood are drawn into his focused, contracting and monstrous body. His innards groan and growl with satisfaction as the girl withers like a leaf before our eyes. The frog watches from the sidelines, a picture of quiet terror. Does he see himself in the place of the girl, perhaps? I do not know. Litherlax gorges for another full minute, draining the girl of every last possible drop. The gears turn in my head, piecing together all the information that I have available, creating a plan as best as I can. The frog, despite his nerves, finds the courage to clear his throat and to interrupt. My lord, the children, the surface dwellers, they will be here soon, surely. Litherlax grunts and disconnects with a shower of droplets of blood. He raises his head to the ceiling, quivering as his sucker-like mouth throbs in pleasure. The girl's corpse tumbles from the table to join another on the grassy floor. He laughs. He chortles and his segments shiver and quake.
Oh, Fermonicles, worry not. I smelled the surface dwellers the moment they arrived.
He swivels and his dark wet mouth now points precisely this way. My blood chills in its veins.
They are already here.
Litherlax darts suddenly forwards, and with a burst of adrenaline, Lauren and I scramble to the side, running out into the hall as Litherlax knocks into the statue. It totters but does not fall.
Surface dwellers, victims to be, how good of you to deliver yourselves to me. I am most grateful.
Lauren, I mutter, get to the lever, bring down Benny's cage.
Yes, Lauren.
Litherlax laughs and taunts as he slithers around us like an oozing leviathan, knocking bodies beyond count to the floor as he moves over the table and blocks Lauren's path to the wall.
Get to the lever. What can you hope to achieve in my halls, children? You are outmatched and outclassed. You have wandered to your doom.
I pause in fright and worry that perhaps the great leech might well be right. I look at my hands, at Lauren's. Our weapons will do little against this thing. A bat and a hockey stick. Blunt instruments. The body of Litherlax would need to be pierced to be seriously harmed. and the only one of us with a weapon of any sharpness at all is Parker, who chose the path on the left. I look to Lauren, and she looks back and sees the determination in my eyes. The plan still holds, they say, and she gives me a brief, almost imperceptible nod. I sidestep away from her, throat wet and moist with the thickness of the air, and I force out a string of taunts. "You disgust me, Litherlax. Why do you lurk down here in the depths? You only ever take one shot at a time. Are you ashamed, is that it? Ashamed of surface dwellers seeing you for what you really are? A common leech, bloated behind its place." I see the frog tense up against the wall in dismay. Litherlax bubbles and frosts with indignation, turning his full attention to me as Lauren steps slowly but deliberately around him, past the table of bodies and steadily over to the wall. The frog sees her approach but dares not to speak for fear of breaking the tension and drawing the focus of Litherlax's rage.
How dare you?
Litherlax blusters, his body bulging and his head dropping almost to my level, his sucker-like mouth pulsating angrily, leaking ooze to the floor by my feet. His breath reeks of iron and blood.
Do you not see how I drained my latest meal? I could do the same to you now with ease.
I hold my ground, sweat leaking down my back. He pauses.
But I must admit, to make it this far to stand against such power and strength with such boldness, I respect that, as much as I might pretend otherwise. I will give you one final chance. Turn tail and return to the surface. Turn around now and never come back.
This sudden change in demeanor sends my alarm bells ringing. I don't buy it for a second. This supposed random compassion. This creature who steals children from the surface. He who drains them of all their blood and leaves them strewn about his halls. I have seen his speed and his strength, yes. I don't doubt that he has the power to drain me in seconds if he so chose. But he hasn't, has he? I glance up to the cage, suspended by its chain. Benny looks down at me, silent but eyes wide, hands gripped tight around the bars. And nor has Litherlax drained Benny. I glance from the statues of Litherlax to his enormous throne, to the cowering body of Harmonicles, the artist frog. I consider the portraits in their hundreds, lining the walls of Litherlax's below puddle, pond mansion home. It's his pride. That's why he can't bring himself to drain me, and his pride will be his downfall. Lauren has reached Harmonicles, and the frog at last can't contain himself no longer. "My lord," he croaks desperately, ducking to avoid the smack of Lauren's hockey stick against the wall behind him. "Do it, Lauren," I shout to her, keeping my eyes firmly on Litherlax. If he has eyes himself, I cannot see them. Litherlax pays the commotion no mind, and I address my next words to he, as Lauren pulls the lever and turns the wheel. Benny's cage rattles down the chain and drops, opening at the base, and our friend falls down onto the corpses below with a grunt. "Litherlax," I begin. "Litherlax, you liar. You compassionless monster. As much as you might want to, you can't eat us now, can you? You just can't. Because we haven't been immortalized as portraits, as trophies for your gallery. God forbid you lose track of your conquests." Litherlax sees, raising himself up to his full height, but I continue, fist clenched and legs shaking. "What if you were to go right ahead and drain us right here and now? Would your frog servant be able to complete the portraits having seen us so little? You would screw them up, surely. They would be wrong, embarrassing mistakes. Permanent reminders of the children who dared to come down and face you, here in your lair." I nod to Benny, now by my side, cowering from the Great Leech. "We've destroyed Benny's work in progress," I lie, thinking about the picture currently rolled up in Lauren's jacket. Does Harmonicles possess the talent to start from scratch, using nothing but his own memory? I shoot an icy glare to the frog across the room, and he cowers back as if stricken with a blow. Lauren has begun to make her way around the edge of the room. The walls shake. So I think we're done here, Litherlax. We'll be on our way now. Litherlax throbs for a moment more and then screams down towards us. Hot and blood-rich, watery air sent blasting across our faces.
I should drain you now for your insolence. How dare you, how dare you?
He splutters and writhes, angrily slamming his tail across the table and knocking the myriad of bodies to the grass. Respect is a two-way street, you disgusting leech. I reply levelly. Litherlax writhes in rage, but he does not strike, and I can only presume that my theory holds. I reach out for Lauren's hand and I haul Benny up to his feet by the back of his shirt, and together we back our way out from the hall.
Fine, consider yourselves escapees, if you will. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. You may be spared the fate of my power, children of the surface, but the pond folk will have you. They will tear you apart as pond scum and feast upon your bones. So go to them and reap your reward.
Litherlax swivels and pulsates, slithering his way back to the throne. His tail whips back and slams into the wall, leaving a dent into deep dark stain. The ground rumbles, and the pond folk approach. Guys, Benny begins, his voice rich with gratitude and surprise. But there is no time, not now. We just run, us three, back the way we came. It's harder now to retrace our steps, but we do our best, running from corridor to corridor as the general roar and rumble that one associates with crowds grows louder and louder ahead. We hear shouting and panic and clamor. Corner after corner, and there at the statue of the toad with the scales lays Parker. He has his arm thrown around the girl and they cower together in the center of a commotion. He had found her. A ring of creatures surrounds them. They are angry and frustrated and scared. Some as big as me, some smaller, some larger. Parker turns to us at the sound of our approach, bruised and jaw clenched tight. The air once again seems thick, far too thick. It's curious how it comes and goes. Bubbles drift up from the disturbed grass to the misty ceiling, and I do my best to ignore them. Parker is unarmed, and after another second of scanning the crowd, it reveals his hammer is held tightly in the hand of a newt, raised and poised as if about to strike. The newt, along with his comrades, turn to regard us, his yellow eyes bulging, his pupils narrowing and widening with uncertainty. Intruders, he whispers, and the word is echoed amongst the others, the frogs and toads and turtles. An enormous fish, suspended impossibly above the ground and floating in place, raises a fin. Her mouth gulps open. You think we can't feel it, she splutters. The tension in the water. Litherlax is disturbed, and it's all your fault. Who will he take out his anger upon? I ask you, who? A murmur of agreement ripples around the group. At the mention of water, I see a stream of bubbles rise up from Parker's mouth. He screws his eyes tight shut in concentration. I watch him regain control of his breathing. The girl clutches tight to his arm. Let us pass, pond folk, I say to them in a loud voice. Let us go on our way. Look, I don't want to fight you. And we won't, Lauren interrupts. I turn to her, as do all the eyes in the room. She steps forwards and drops her hockey stick to the ground. We aren't so different, really, we aren't. The tension is palpable, but they hold her words and she continues. Please, just let us go. We are sorry for disturbing you, for disturbing all of you, but we had no choice. And Litherlax is weak, weaker than he pretends. He cannot paint for himself his trophies. He needs your skills for that. The creatures look down to their hands, webbed and long and green and gray. He might be large now, but he relies upon the blood of his victims to grow, blood that he struggles to drain before his conquest is immortalized. If he can't get his meals, he will shrink, and he can't get his meals if the paintings are never completed. He is bound by his pride. They look at each other, these creatures from below. There is a general murmur of unease, of cautious hope. "Foolish girl," says the newt. He pushes aside his fellows and steps from the circle. "If we try to hold Litherlax back from his prey, he will turn on us. He will drain us dry in their place." "Has he ever? Is there even a single painting of one of your kind in this entire mansion?" The newt stirs. I can see the watery cogs turn fast in his brain. He doesn't need portraits for us. We aren't worthy of the title of trophy. We don't need to be painted, surely. But he doesn't sound convinced. He just doesn't know. He doesn't know for sure. "Please," Lauren urges, stepping forwards and taking his slippery hands in hers. "Just let us go, just this time." The newt does not respond, but slowly, ever so slowly, as if fighting against his own instincts, he steps to one side. And following his lead, the others do the same. Silently they part and a path opens up through the crowd center. Parker is back on his feet. He clutches tight to the girl's hand, and the 5 of us quietly make our way through the pond folk. We pass them all by, creature after creature, and we leave them behind. And then once the corner has been rounded, we run. We run for the final time back along the corridors, back past the rooms, back through the dining room and back through the hall with the snake's pedestal. Back past the portraits, painting after painting. I detect from the portraits a faint smell of blood that I hadn't noticed before. And just as exhaustion threatens to take a hold, the stairs appear in our sights at the end of the hall, the great stone steps. "A little further," I call out, "just a little further." And before we know it, we feel the hard stone of the stairs beneath our feet. Up we climb and we feel the rush of the bubbles grow stronger now, irresistibly strong. They rush about our ears and blur our vision. Struggling to breathe now, I can only push forwards, hand held with someone else. I can't tell who in the madness, climbing and climbing. And with a sudden gasp of cool night air, the puddle is behind me. I become instantly aware that I am drenched to the bone, and stagger from the puddle with my hair in my eyes, leaking down my face. I stumble and slip, crashing down with a grunt back into the water. The water that now is surely no more than a few inches deep. I feel the rough, wet, stony earth of the ground against my hands beneath. I turn over onto my back and push my hair from my eyes, spitting out a mouthful of pond water, panting, and I see them. Lauren and Parker and the girl that he had rescued from below. And Benny, alive and safe. I grin at the boy and he grins right back. Lauren squeezes him into a hug and Parker does much the same. "Jesus," comes a voice from behind. It's one of the trio, the kids tasked with guarding the pond. They did their best. I know that they would have held back the creatures for as long as they could. I turn to face him, and as I do so, the girl that we saved runs straight from the water right into his arms. The remaining teenagers stare with their mouths wide open as the two emotionally embrace, and it becomes clear to me that the two are siblings. It's obvious, really, when you think to look. "Emma," he chokes. "I never thought that I would see you again. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have come for you myself if I had any idea that you would still be alive." He trails off and breaks down into sobs, and we watch as the moon appears from behind a cloud, bathing the dripping girl and her brother in its cool and silvery light. Movement to my right catches my eye. I look down to the grass. There sits a little frog. It regards me in silence, its neck swelling and contracting, the light of the moon shining as sparkles in the corners of its eyes. And then it hops down into the water and promptly disappears. It's been almost 2 months since then, and no more kids have disappeared. The teenager who blamed himself for Benny's disappearance has taken it upon himself to set up dedicated groups and patrols. "No one walks alone," he proclaimed, and to this day he's kept his promise. Benny's fine. He worries that he'll never be able to truly repay the debt that he owes us, despite our constant reassurances that he owes us no debt at all. And Litherlocks. I do not know if the pond folk ever conducted their uprising, but the seeds have at least been sown, and no one's seen or heard from him since. "Gross, it smells like crap in here, man," Calvin spoke. His voice carried down the seemingly unending tunnel, echoing far past the point our cell phone lights faded. "That's 'cause there's probably crap in here." Terrence started with a mischievous grin, nudging Cal with his shoulder. "Old sewage and rancid, drugged-out bum crap." Cal dry-heaved. "Gross, man," I interjected. "Please stop before he pukes." Terrence chuckled, slapping Calvin on the back and stepping away, taking a few steps down the opposite end of the tunnel. Calvin shuddered, glancing around the surroundings uneasily. Cal screwed his face in what seemed like a near-permanent look of disgust, eyes darting about and frowning as though he wanted to crawl out of his very skin from discomfort. It's always funny, Calvin being the tallest of us, how quick to fright he always was. Cal was a massive kid, just under 6'2" and hefty. With a build for football, though, he always had lacked the interest. He was something of a frightful giant. I couldn't blame him at this instant. However, we had certainly hung out in more congenial settings than the current. One of the many tunnels in a maze of interconnected defunct sewer drains, running under the old section of town in our community. The idea had been Terrence's, both during one of our smoke sessions in the treehouses in Calvin's backyard. Our conversation had moved from school to girls before somehow landing on the topic of some of our small town's local legends. Eventually, the conversation had turned to, in particular, the story that we had all grown up with since middle school, and every kid who had grown up in our town knew some variation of it by heart. The tale of the Cold Lake Three. It was one of those local legends, but of more recent years. The sort of intoxicating blend of verifiable events and supernatural conjecture sure to leave a footprint in the culture of any quiet town. The story has different versions and endings depending on who told it to you, but the basic details were always about the same. 9 years ago, 3 older kids had disappeared. This part was probably genuine. They were Katie Waller, Ben Wilkins, and Theodore Foster, or the Cold Lake Three, as local news had dubbed them, students from the very high school that I now attended. I was in elementary school when it had happened, and for that year, it was practically all anybody could talk about. It had been the most significant thing to happen to Cold Lake and the surrounding county in some time. I recall even in elementary having assemblies about the tragedy, and calling for vigilance until the police knew more. As time had passed, theories developed, ranging from the idea that the 3 were friends and had plotted to leave town altogether, to whispers of a murderer in Cold Lake. As far as anyone knew, nothing ever came of the case, and when a year had passed without so much as a body, it seemed that most media interest had waned. It was around this point that the stories began. I had first heard it at my first middle school party, Dave Christie's birthday party, gathered around a bonfire, Terrence along with me. We had all gathered around the fire pit in Dave's backyard, party hats strapped tight, and the high of sugar coursing through our veins beginning to fade, when his older brother Brent had gathered us all together with the promise of a story regarding the one topic that everybody in town knew, claiming to know a side of it that he insisted the grown-ups wouldn't tell us. First, he began, peering around the gathering of middle schoolers. Who here knows about the CL3? Hands shot up, and sounds of recognition spread through the group. Even at our young age, we had all heard of the Three's disappearance. Curfews and allowances for going outside to play became much more restrictive during that time. Our parents often wielded the threat of ending up like the 3 as a cudgel to dissuade disobedience, wandering too far, staying out too late, the like. What few of us knew, however, the veil of childhood naivety and adult secrecy keeping it from our ears, they were the stories. These were the tales from some of those tasked with searching for the three, and the whisperings that would trickle out from Old Town following the events. Brent smiled, eyes gleaming with a mischievous look. Well then, which of you little dorks have heard about the tunnels? None of us raised our hands at the question, unsure glances passing between my peers and me. He snorted, a forced snort of sound scoffing at us. Then you don't know anything. Your parents probably don't want you guys getting scared, and the police don't want to admit that they're clueless. But when you get older, you hear things. He's smart. You guys want to know the truth? The fire crackled as if on cue, making a few of us jump. A few kids stood and laughed, reaching their limit on scary for the night. After the initial surprise, the rest of us nodded. Those kids didn't run away. Theo, Ben, and Katie. People at school knew them, and yeah, they were weirdos, but not like that. My eyes widened as I began to process what he was saying. You went to school with the Cold Lake Three? I gasped. He nodded. Duh, I'm only a sophomore. It was last year. The event had seemed so massive that I'd almost forgotten it was that recent and so close to home. I almost certainly knew people who had known the three. They were loners, except with each other. I think Katie and Ben were dating, and Theo was Ben's best and only other friend, so they were almost always together. My dad said that Theo Foster killed Ben and Katie because he was jealous. A heavy-set boy a few spots away from me chimed in. Yeah, your dad's a moron. Theo passed out in biology at the idea of dissecting a frog. No, they didn't kill each other or run away. He sighed, eyes narrowing as if recalling something that had bothered him. Then what happened? Dave asked. The tunnels, he said, voice low and ominous over the hiss of a crackling fire. They started hanging out in these tunnels under the old part of town. There's an old sewer system under Old Town. They never finished it and no one knows why. But they sealed it off and decided to build the current system that we have now instead. I couldn't see where the story was going, but I felt riveted. It felt as though Brent was letting us in on a secret, the true depths of which I doubt he even knew, and which I wouldn't find out until my nightmare beneath the city. Well, Ben and Theo got bored one afternoon, wandering Old Town and smoking as they always did, and I guess they found one of the maintenance hatches and broke in. As he spoke, recognition bloomed. I had heard of the old sewer line, years before from my grandfather. He had been well past his best days, dementia wreaking its havoc on his mind, but he always seemed to recall one warning. Stay away from the manholes in the Old Town, Darnell, he would say, always using my father's name instead. Ain't nothing good in this town, and even less beneath our feet. As a child, his warning seemed merely the ramblings of a fading mind, but sitting in that backyard, I felt a twinge of excitement as I began to connect the two. Brent continued. They found a whole crap ton of tunnels down there, some massive. There's never stuff to do in this town, and before long, it became their own personal hangout. He took a sip from the beer that he had stolen out of his dad's fridge, a knowing look appearing on his face as he seemed to dwell on some uneasy thought. It was weird, but they were kind of weird loner kids, so the fact that they took to loitering in sewers, it made sense. Nobody thought anything of it until they started telling these, stories. It was Theo first. He swore that something was living down there, that upon wandering the sewers, he had found a passageway into a part of the underground that was different. Another swig and that troubled look had deepened. Different how? I hardly realized that I was speaking until I had asked the question. He frowned a bit. It was much too big, he started, and too old. I don't know how he knows, but he said the tunnels that he found were much too old to be built anytime recently. I guess he started getting curious, he said. Heading in alone, and one night, he found something, or it found him. A log popped in the fire, making my heart lurch with a sudden fear. Something chased him out, he swore. He never saw it in the darkness of that old sewer, but he had heard it. Something big and fast and hungry. Told everybody who would listen. He shrugged. No clue why he went back and why any of them did. Maybe he wanted to prove a point. But the next time any of us saw the three of them, it was on that day after school heading for Old Town. So what happened? Another kid asked. What do you think? Brent snorted in response. I know what the adults are saying, and I also know that ever since the three, they've tried to keep the old sewer entrances locked up tight. Police have chased off a few kids trying to explore down there, for all the good that it's doing. Why would they do that if they thought those kids just ran away? None of us had an answer, and I suspect all felt much too frightened in the ominous dark of the night to say anything. It's 'cause there's something going on down there in that old sewer. Something the people in charge know about and are freaking terrified of, and are trying their best to keep it hidden. He paused, peering around the fire at us with a devilish grin as if to let the fear settle in. There are monsters beneath this town, kiddos. Try not to get caught. That was our first introduction to the idea of the sewers, and it wouldn't be the last. As insane as it might sound given what we were told, and the story that most kids believed, the disappearances became a sort of an urban legend. With that status, the sewers became a spot for local teenager daredevils or fans of the supernatural to test their mettle. It was a badge of honor to return with your own creepy story of odd sounds chasing you from the darkness, or sightings of the impossible that only the bravest of us had received. And while most of these stories were surely exaggerated, or faked altogether by attention-seeking kids, some stood out in their consistency. With youth comes a strange sense of invincibility, and a curious need to peer into the darkness. And so years after that night, I now found myself and my two best friends roaming those very same tunnels in search of our own story. We would get so much more than we had bargained for. It had been Terrence's idea, as these things so often were, a suggestion made over a joint following a horror movie marathon. The anniversary of the disappearance of the Cold Lake Three had recently passed, and as usual, with it came a resurgence in stories and rumors about what had happened to them, the most popular of which amongst our age range, involving the theory that there was something more to the tunnels beneath the city. It had led to a spate of self-styled daredevils and thrill-seekers amongst our high school, making it a point to venture into the sewers in search of something. Though most returned with little more than tales of vague, creepy sounds, there were the few who claimed to have seen them. Kyle Bruck swore that he saw something racing towards him in the water one week when he had been spray painting the walls of the main line, and Shelley Anders refused to ever return to the sewers after insisting she had seen a face in some of the gray water. And Terrence, however, was only encouraged by these tales, always one to push the envelope, and with more than a passing interest in stories of spooks and ghouls, the recent resurgence of the myth was a source of much excitement for him. Before long, he had convinced the two of us to venture into the sewers with him in search of local legends. It hadn't taken much convincing on my part. I had been to a few raves in the sewers before, even hung out on the main lines before, and while they were pretty gross, I had never found them quite so frightening. Granted, I was never alone, and I'd be lying if I claimed the myths didn't intrigue me as well. The idea that we might be our town's excuse for frontiersmen, the first of our class and maybe ever in ages, to venture into some long-forgotten part of the little world constructed underground was exciting. And Calvin was a different story, ever the cautious one and a bit of a germaphobe at that. He had little interest in hanging out in a supposedly haunted sewer system. Unfortunately for him, we're kind of each other's only other friends, and anybody who remembers what those days were like knows the only thing worse than being scared at that age is having your friends leave you behind while they go off to do anything without you. So he was right alongside us, face a permanent mask of disgust and unease as we moved through the tunnel. "Look, can we just go back to my house or something?" Calvin groaned. I rolled my eyes a bit, though I couldn't begrudge his unease. The atmosphere down there was strange. The air was thick with a dank, wet smell that reminded me of the year my basement had flooded, along with the faint but putrid scent of lingering waste. The tunnel's construction was such that it swallowed anything more than a yard ahead in the murky darkness, from which the distant sounds of running water and the grating drip of condensation on the damp pavement echoed. I could almost see how it was enough to make the overactive imagination conjure images of figures stalking through the darkness ahead. I shuddered despite myself. It stinks down here, and I don't even care about these stupid myths, especially not enough to want to hang out in these creepy old sewers. Terrence faked a cough. "Baby," he muttered in between, prompting Calvin to slug him on the arm. Come on, guys," I scoffed. "Argue when we get to a point that we can stand up straight." We had entered the tunnels through a massive opening on the outskirts of town, in a ditch beside the now dry bed of a stream. I was unfamiliar with the entrance, as most people usually just entered through one of the maintenance entrances, but Terrence had other ideas. Having heard about the entrance from a friend who claimed it led to an unexplored portion of the sewers, Terrence decided then and there that it would be our mission to be the first to venture the length of the new entrance. The opening was a concrete pipe, jutting from the side of a ditch where a stream had once run, in space no less than 5 feet wide on all sides, in which only one could see so far into the inky blackness. We had been walking for a little over 5 minutes, heads crouched low to avoid brushing up against the ceiling, which bore a permanent flaky layer of brown that we all chose to accept as rust. On the way, we had passed a diverging path in the tunnels, disappearing off somewhere to the right, and debated using it but decided to remain on the straight path forward. We moved in search of an opening into one of the main lines, which was where people usually chose to dwell down here for their size and adequate standing room. The main lines were the largest of the tunnels, massive cavernous pathways of nearly 20 feet in diameter, with still rivers of murky, gray water, 5 feet across, separating the walkways on either side. Guys, do we even know how long this tunnel is? How long are we gonna walk? What if we don't find it? The steady undertone of panic in Cal's voice grew less subtle as he spoke, his questions echoing up and down the tunnel. We kept moving forward, though he had slowed to match Cal's dwindling pace. "Cal, relax, man," Terrence spoke, his tone less teasing but still playful. "Bill Marsh told me about this path. It's like a 5-minute walk, then we should see another opening. Crawl through there and I'd bet we're in never-before-seen parts of the main line." Bet. I could have taken note of the lack of certainty in his statement, but my back was sore and I was tired. Along with my growing discomfort, my head felt too muddled for me to notice. Okay, and then what? We just walk around until what? We hear something creepy and get to run back and tell everyone. He looked unconvinced. Terrence scoffed. I mean, yeah, we're not here for a tour of sewage history. I chuckled, offering Cal an apologetic shrug as he shot me a look. Listen, man, if you're too scared and are going to complain the whole time, just head on back. You know the way out. Kevin and I will meet you back at the house. He nodded off down the tunnel towards the entrance that we had used. But we've heard these stories since we were kids, and Kevin and I are going to go check it out. Calvin considered the offer, looking between us to see if either would relent, and then head back down the tunnel. God, how I now regret not stepping in and agreeing with them. Hey, I chimed in. We'll be in and out. If nothing happens, heck, if something does happen, we'll dip. I could see his reluctance or resistance rather waning. On Monday, we can tell everyone at lunch how we braved these spooky sewers under Old Town. Michelle might be impressed. Screw you," he said with a tense laugh. "Let's go." And Terrence whooped, clapping him on the shoulder. I shot him a smile and we continued forward. As we moved deeper into the tunnel, it became obvious that we were growing closer to some body of water, as almost half an inch of water had begun to pool at our feet. In the darkness ahead, the hiss of running water grew louder, echoing from all around us off of the dome-like walls. The space grew tighter the farther that we moved, until the three of us were moving in a line. "It should be pretty close," Terrence muttered, the exertion of crouching for so long present in his voice. Bill said it looked like a real tight squeeze close to the entrance. "Keep your lights pointed forward, we should see it soon." "Sad?" I asked, straining from exertion. "He hasn't used the tunnel before." Terrence sighed, and I could make out a nod. "No, he doesn't come down here much anymore, and when he does, it's to graffiti up one of the main entrances. He said he found this by accident, and that was as far as he wanted to go." I didn't reply, letting the response sit for a moment, and Terrence quickly spoke as if to dismiss any concerns. "It'll be fine, the whole thing connects anyways, and the town wasn't even a third of the way done when construction had stopped, so it's not that big of a place." I scoffed but grunted my affirmation, far too strained to argue verbally as the muscles in my back and thighs began to burn in protest of our continued crouching. The sound of running water grew to fill the tunnel, and before long, it had soaked through the soles of our shoes as we had moved forward, Terrence taking point, with myself and Calvin in a tight row behind him. As we moved, the distinct sounds of us moving through the water became our sole background noise, a repeating rhythm created by our almost regimented push forward. Along with the distant rush, it was the only sound to be heard in the tightening cavern, and it became something of an absent-minded game to time my steps with everyone else. After almost 5.5 minutes of walking, my mind became hardly aware of the noise as anything other than ambience anymore. I think that's why when it first began, I hardly noticed the change. It was the already anxious Calvin that realized it first, a significant detail that the two of us were somehow missing. Having spoken after the fact, the few times we've ever felt comfortable recounting the experience with one another, I know now that Cal had become aware long before he had spoken. That stuck at the rear with walls to either side of him, he realized that if he was hearing what he thought he was hearing, our best bet was to push forward. I felt a firm hand grip my shoulder and turned as best as I could in the tight space to find Calvin staring back at me, his face illuminated in the harsh light of his phone, eyes wide with a look of silent horror. He moved his mouth, though nothing came out, and for a moment confusion washed through me before I realized what was going on. He was mouthing something, a word. "Listen." My face screwed, but I peeked my ears, stepping with measured care to hear whatever he was referring to. All we could hear were the sounds of our own feet pushing through the inches of water beneath us, 3 distinct steps forward. Our eyes were just as wide as a warm, static burst flash of shock rippled through my very molecules. I'd heard it as clear as day from somewhere behind Calvin. Something else was moving through the tunnel behind us. I swallowed, and for a moment, the two of us just looked between one another, asking the same silent question, our looks answering off. "Did you hear that?" We knew that we both had. For the first time since we had entered the sewers, I felt much like Calvin as my guts twisted into uneasy knots. I peered past Calvin, hoping to catch sight of some other teenagers making their way down the same tunnel, but to my disappointment and growing unease, we had turned several corners since entering, and little to no light reached the long stretch behind us. Still, the darkness that now seemed to mass behind us felt unnatural, almost oppressive, and from within it echoed still, the unmistakable sound of someone drawing closer as they splashed through the water. It was clear that whoever was behind us cared little if we had heard their approach. I considered saying something, alerting Terrence perhaps, and by the looks of it, Calvin was too, but still I shook my head. The echo in the tunnel all but ensured whoever was behind us would hear, a thought that made my guts knot with a cold unease. Were it not for the rush of water somewhere close ahead, now so loud it began to overcome even the sound of our own footsteps, our guest's approach surely would have echoed throughout the entire tunnel. "Here it is," Terrence spoke. I pointed my flashlight forward with his, revealing the small round opening in the stone wall ahead. On the other side, water roared in the tunnel below. Rails lining the path for walking visibly on the other side, but there was something strange about it. The light shone and faded as it stretched past the railing, and still it only found darkness. The entrance into the main line was a tight squeeze, almost a concrete porthole to the other side. "Welcome, boys, to the underground," Terrence spoke, beaming back at us, the light of his phone stretching odd shadows across his face. "Yeah, amazing, just go." The urgency in Calvin's voice was almost panicked. Though unaware of the fourth person in the tunnel, Terrence smirked, dismissing it as more of Calvin's usual anxiety. He turned, climbing into the tight tunnel and shuffling out onto the other side, beckoning us to follow. I did next. The tube smelled of rust and still water, and I felt my heart race with the anxiety of being in a space so tight, only to soar as Terrence had pulled me to the other side. I caught my balance with my hand, lowering myself out of the tube and onto the concrete walking path on our side. As I rose to my feet, I got a better look at the chamber that served as home to what was practically a man-made river. I felt my mind waver, a rising sense of tingling unease swelling as it took in the sheer scope of the space in which I found myself. "Whoa," I breathed, the word seeming to travel down either end of the corridor. "Yup," Terrence responded. "Welcome to the underworld." The tunnel was massive in a way I could hardly fathom being possible just beneath our feet. Somehow the ceiling and walls extended out at all sides, until I was certain that a passenger plane could have fit through. "Guys, I don't know if I want to try this, it's going to be a tight fit." Cal's pleading tone came through the tunnel. Terrence turned back with a groan. "You'll be fine, man, trust me, I'll pull you through." Calvin sighed, muttering to himself. As I shone my light around, trying to get a sense of the space that I had entered, I could make out graffiti covering the walls, in various stages of wear and tear, all reading eerily similar or ominous messages. We never should have opened these tunnels. God forgive us. Abandoned all hope. And for whatever reason, the one that stuck with me the most scratched into the wall just above the tunnel that we had entered through. "If you're here, it's already too late." I stifled a chill, but it did little to stop the rapidly growing sense of wrongness the air seemed thick with. I pointed the light over the railing, aiming it into the murky gray waters beneath. I could make out nothing, not even the depth in the stream of filth, and felt oddly an odd twist of panic in my gut as I stared into it, as though something might be lurking just beneath the surface. I peered around the tunnel some more, illuminating more graffiti and impromptu art, before the light fell on something that made me stop. At the roof of the tunnel on opposing sides sat what appeared to be valves, closed with iron lids. Between them was a warning, left in large yellow letters and accompanied by an ominous illustration I can describe only as the outline of a man, with a facsimile of the Grim Reaper lurking over his shoulder. What it read sent a chill down my spine. "Warning, hostile non-human entity. Unauthorized personnel leave immediately or risk death." My heartbeat picked up and I tried to force a nervous chuckle, though I failed. Surely it had to have been a prank of some sort, or some weird graffiti left behind by a prior visitor meant to freak us out. Yet that didn't feel right. The warning looked real and official despite as insane as it had sounded. Non-human entity, I shuddered. I had not really expected our journey to turn up anything, and things were beginning to feel much too strange for me, my mind running with those vague stories of what had happened to the Cold Lake 3. Cal, what are you doing, man? Let's go. Terrence's voice pierced my sinking train of thought. I turned to face him in the tunnel that Calvin should have already climbed through, yet with Terrence's light shining on it, I could see that it was empty. I stepped closer, that strange sinking feeling only growing worse. As I approached, I kneeled over and could see Calvin standing on the other side of the tunnel. He was trying to stand stock still, his back towards us, but his body shook uncontrollably. Cal, I called. Guys. He spoke the word like a plea. His voice was wavering with a sort of terror that I had never heard in real life before, palpable and infectious. There's something in here with me. My heart simultaneously plummeted and began to race painfully as I recalled the footsteps that we had heard in the tunnel behind us. Dread washed over me as I realized something else about what he had said. Something. Suddenly the story of the Cold Lake 3 felt horrifyingly relevant. What are you talking about? Terrence called, sounding slightly irritated. Dude, stop freaking out and come. Guys, it's coming around the corner. It's... His voice stopped for a moment. When he spoke next, it was a question, his words tinged with palpable dread. Oh God, what is that? The sound of movement was unmistakable now, loud and growing louder each second, as it echoed from amidst the darkness of the tunnel. Calvin stood stock still, tension clearing his body under the harsh cell phone light. The noise that came next, I still hear it in my nightmares. It was a cross between a moan and a shriek, wet, piercing, and wholly unnatural. It was as though the floodgates had opened and dread had flooded through me, filling my body and making my skin run hot. Terrence jumped, backing away from the hole that we had climbed through, standing stiffly. Guys, help me please, it's coming. Calvin's horrified shrieks pierced my very being, curdling my blood. I could hear commotion and in moments saw the top of his head as he tried to squirm through the pipe that we used to enter. His eyes were wide and bulging with panic, his face pale and glistening with a sheen of sweat as he tried to scoot forward. On the other end of the pipe, somewhere behind him, that god-awful sound towed through the air again, pushing Calvin to move even more frantically until he wasn't moving forward at all. He grunted with exertion, one arm out, the other stuck at his side, as he tried to pull himself free and into the chamber that we were in, but to no avail. Pull me out, he screamed. I'm stuck, it's getting closer. Terrence and I both hurried to either side of the opening, with him grabbing the arm flailing for purchase, and myself gripping him by the collar of his jacket. From just behind him in the tunnel we had just been, a noise like a cross between a choking gurgle and discordant laughter echoed from far too close. It was nearly on him. I tugged, heat blooming through my face and my muscles screaming with exertion. Terrence doing much the same, and still, Calvin seemed fixed in place despite his and our frantic struggle. Please! Calvin's voice was shrill and raw to the extent that I couldn't imagine his throat wasn't practically bleeding. Terrence pulled, wide-eyed and sweating as he did, Calvin's own panic having spread through the both of us en masse. I timed my effort with his heart, pounding in my chest as we pulled once, twice, 3 times to no avail until on the 4th. Movement. Calvin slid forward just a bit, and I felt my heart roar. It would plummet immediately after. Our moment of respite was crushed, and all progress was erased as, without warning, Calvin shot back into the tunnel with impossible force. No! Terrence cried, nearly hitting his head against the stone wall with force, while I myself had barely avoided being pulled into the tunnel. The sound that came out of that tunnel was like a symphony to a nightmare. That horrendous gurgling paired with a strange sort of yipping bark that sounded almost like laughter, and Calvin's screams. No longer were they the shrieks of a man in a dire panic, but a wounded and dying animal fighting for its life. I had to fight the urge not to vomit, my head spinning under the steady flow of dread as though I might fall at any moment. Terrence cried out in surprise, stumbling away as a stomach-churning wet crunching echoed forth. With an unsteady hand, Shaking like a leaf in a hurricane, I raised my phone, aiming the light down the tunnel. My heart plummeted into the cold waters of dread rising in the pit within my chest. My vision shook as though my eyes were rejecting the sight before me. I stared through the tunnel, peering into a scene from a nightmare. Calvin was on his knees, a set of impossibly large, swollen hands holding him by his shoulders. They were covered in dozens of fat, wriggling digits emerging from all over, running up the rolls of its arms, digging into his clothing and fleshing, kneading at him excitedly. The skin moved and wavered, and it looked as though smaller fingers were trying to press their way to the surface. The thing's face was still obscured, reaching to the ceiling of the small tunnel that had almost filled entirely with its massive form. But it was clear that what I was looking at was not a human, or at least it was no longer. It filled the tunnel, nearly crushing Calvin to the wall with its mass, an immense being of bubbling flesh and grasping fingers. Calvin's screams filled the air, at this point little more than background noise to the horror unfolding. Small thin strips of flesh like tentacles gripped at him angrily as it raised him closer. Please, Calvin whimpered, voice wavering with unrestrained emotion. The thing gurgled, its face, practically part of its torso, broke into a toothy smile, its impossibly wide mouth spreading to reveal rows of massive teeth. Two fish-like eyes like twin pools of oil peered back at us. Despite its features being something out of a nightmare, there were traces of something human within, most notably its expression, a smile that made my blood curdle, dripping with malintent. Its mouth opened, spreading far wider than any jaw should. My heart fell into the pit of my stomach as I watched it raise my friend until its mouth encircled his head. He stared at us as best he could, eyes wide but devoid of hope. Go, Terrence muttered a curse, a voice shaking. Sorry, man, he muttered, the hurt in his words shared. We ran, and the sound that followed us as we fled into the darkness ahead is one that I'll never forget. A scream of impossible pain disappearing immediately into a shrill gurgle and a wet crunch. Warm tears stung my eyes as we ran. I felt like a coward, yet any faint idea of returning was dashed by the sounds it made as it devoured him, horrific shrieks that echoed off of the walls as though it were all around us. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever as we ran, and as these sounds of our friend's end began to fade, the imminent sense of doom gripped us again. We had no idea where we were going or if we were any nearer to an exit. From somewhere in the darkness behind us, far closer than it should have been, that thing roared. Somehow I knew that its feast was complete and that we were next. Terrence began to cry audibly as we both picked up the pace, his legs surely burning as my own were, hearts thrumming to the point of overexertion. Another roar, closer this time. How freaking far does this thing go? I called, my lungs on fire. I don't know, he called back. It killed Calvin. Calvin's dead and we're gonna die. As if in confirmation, its roar rang off of the stone walls again, growing louder over the rush of water. Our lights danced along the walls and floor as we ran, nearly blind until I caught sight of something that, for the first time, was an ember of hope in this waking nightmare. There's a tunnel, Terrence, over here. I had nearly missed it as my light just barely crossed it as we ran, but by some stroke of luck or the blessing of whatever God might exist, I caught a glimpse of it. We stopped, something that felt against my every natural instinct, as the very ground shook beneath us under the steady approach of the thing from the sewers. It was another tunnel, not unlike the one we had made our way through before, just a bit wider. A realization that even in the horror of the moment struck my heart as I recalled Cal's final moments. Crap, dude, what if it doesn't lead outside? Terrence said, his tone now awfully similar to our lost friend. I swallowed. We have no other choice. That thing is going to catch us. It's this or... I trailed off. We both knew there was little time to decide. Before he could take a moment more to think, I was moving, crawling through the opening at a fevered pace, and I could hear Terrence behind me in an instant, that thing approaching not far behind either of us. There was no way to hold the phone and make our way forward at a fast pace, so we sacrificed sight for speed, and in doing so, moved forward in pitch black, potentially even deeper into the maze that apparently existed down here. We had been moving for what would have been almost 3 minutes when, from the opening of the tunnel, there was a roar unlike any of those before. Raw with a strange animal sort of rage, it had found us. A sound like the rush of a train began from somewhere in the darkness behind us. "Go!" Terrence cried. I needed no encouragement. We scurried through the tunnel like human rats in a maze, the threat of violent death bearing even closer with the sound of a freight train when... Light! I felt a surge of hope erupt forth in me, somehow pulling energy from reserves I didn't know that I had and pushing me forward. As the tunnel curved, I could see the source, and it was the exit. It was dimmer outside than before, and I could tell the sun had set a bit. But even that little bit of remaining light was a world of difference, and we moved knowing full well that our life depended on it. "It's getting close. It keeps grabbing at my leg, man. Go." As the light grew closer, so did the creature. I could feel its warmth where I was, and the smell of rot clung thick. It was surely no more than a few feet behind of Terrence. As I reached the mouth of the tunnel, I took no liberty with grace, throwing myself out with reckless abandon, sending myself tumbling down a small decline into a ditch in the forest floor. I took a second to gather myself dazed and with an odd pain in my right wrist, but it all faded as my mind returned to the moment. Terrence's face emerged from the tunnel, a mask of sheer terror, a sheen of sweat making his hair cling to his forehead as he tried to throw himself forward much as I did. He careened through the air and he stopped halfway before snapping back into the ground below. Terrence's leg remained in the tunnel, gripped by one of the fleshy appendages, its skin tentacles all wrapping themselves around him. My vision seemed to shake, a familiar horror returning as images of Calvin raised into the beast's mouth returned to mind. No. I ran forward, pulling myself up the small hill just as it began sliding back into the tunnel, and pulled with every bit of strength left in me. He moved forward just enough that his legs were fully out of the tunnel, though it still held him, but only for a moment. Like something out of a movie, the skin on its arm began to sizzle, smoke rising under the sunlight. The thing squealed like a stuck pig, pulling the appendage back into the tunnel. Its body seemed to shake and quiver until I realized that it was readjusting itself to face us. Somehow those massive dark eyes seemed to burn with anger, the look of a predator deprived of its meal. We stood there in awe and horror, and exhaustion until it disappeared back into the darkness with a parting hiss. After a few moments, the two of us broke down and darted home, both in tears. I don't know what I expected when we told folks what had happened. Of course, we'd have to tell them that Calvin was dead, but I hadn't had enough time to really think of consequences, as we had struggled to survive. But there were none that should follow the suspicious disappearance of a teenager anyways. We got a stern talking to about avoiding places that we shouldn't be, and both of us were grounded after. I know my parents never fully trusted me. Calvin's parents never forgave us, and I couldn't blame them. His name was whispered all over town. Just like the three, they say. It seemed like already everyone knew, and yet no one had told us. I guess that's why I'm writing this, to tell you that bored kid growing up in a quiet town looking for adventure. Respect local legends, they exist for a reason. Otherwise, you're bound to become one.